So just out of curiosity this week, I went online and I asked this question. Can you give me a list of vocations of people who generally feel like they're searching for greatness or significance or reward, but rarely feel like they actually ever get it? This is the list that it gave me. It's a pretty long list if you think about it. If any of us were missed on this list, then I guess we're sitting pretty great. Jesus really knew what he was doing. He really knew what he was doing when he addressed this issue that the disciples, they weren't even able to verbalize today. The way that Mark lays it out in our gospel, they weren't even able to say it out loud. Jesus had to read their minds. He had to read their minds to see that they were arguing about who the greatest was. You take a look at this list, and there's one vocation that didn't make the list, but I think it's pretty safe to say that it absolutely needs to be included. And not just because Jesus sort of references it in our gospel for today. Here it is. It's parents. It's been said that parenting is a thankless job. You do all the work of raising your children, you sacrifice for them, and you almost never get the credit that you're looking for. It's been said that parenting is a thankless job. I could stand here and just rattle off an entire list about all the things that my mom did for me when I was a kid, but we've got other things that we want to talk about today. But I will say this, that I didn't really realize it, and you don't really realize it until you're older. It didn't really hit me when I went to high school or college, because when I was at high school or college, there was cafeteria food, which was decent, and I had a dorm room to sleep in. But it hit me when God blessed us with children of our own. Because there's nothing jaw-dropping about changing diapers. But there's plenty of jaw-dropping moments. There's nothing glamorous or spectacular about being covered in snot and spaghetti, and no one's watching. It all goes unnoticed. There's no, you're the greatest, for making sure that things are in place and things are going well. It's been said that parenting is a thankless job. Most of the time because all of that goes unnoticed. And that set in for me this week. It set in that striving for greatness but never actually feeling like you're getting it. It set in this week, so much so that I called my mom and just said, hey, thank you for putting up with a menace like me. And then it also set in this week, aside from being raised by my mom or any of us being raised by our parents, it set in this week that search for greatness, that desire to have it, but never feeling like you actually get it. It hits home. And it hits home deep when we take a look at our gospel. When we take a look at Mark chapter 9 and see. Because it's not any different for the Christian. It's not any different for the Christian. Our calling as followers of Christ is a lot like that. It can kind of seem like a thankless job. It can kind of seem like we're trying to pursue greatness. We're in search of it, but we're never actually getting there. Yes. The calling for us as Christians, it is a calling where we get to humbly serve, but that doesn't mean that we throw greatness out the window. No way. Greatness is something that we want. Greatness is something to be sought after. And Jesus even points that out today. That desire to want to be great, it's a beautiful thing. It's something we all want. We just got to figure out what greatness is and what it looks like. And that's what Jesus does for us today. Pursuing greatness, yeah, that should be easy since I'm not God. It should be easy since I'm not God, since we're not God. You'd think the disciples would have gotten that. Like Jesus was less than 5 yards away from them. You'd think that they would have just gotten it. If there is anyone who would be remotely close to great, it would be that guy right there. He's the one who has got power. He's the one who's fed 5,000 people. He's the one who's able to drive out demons when we can't. He's the one when he's talking, you can hear a coin hit the floor because everyone is in the zone. Pursuing greatness? Yeah, that should be easy since I'm not God. It's not even a competition. It's not even a competition. And if it is a competition, then we're still left at the starting line. Because if God is God, and he has got all the power, and yet at the same time, he says that we're royalty through him. And even though all of our righteous acts are like filthy rags, we're still great, right? Jesus really knew what he was doing when he addressed this issue. He knew what he was doing, because apparently the world says that all of us are going through it. We are all in pursuit of greatness, but never feel like we actually get it. We're all pursuing greatness, and yet at the same time, we're arguing in our own minds, or maybe amongst one another, about whether or not we're accomplishing that goal, or whether or not we're the greatest. You know, you take a look at the disciples, and you think about it, it must have felt pretty good to be one of the 12. Like, Jesus picked me. Talk about egos that could have easily filled a room. Jesus picked me. On top of that, Peter, James, and John, they got the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity just before our gospel for today. Once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go up on a mountain and watch Jesus shine brighter than any human being in this world. And then, on top of that, they didn't even go blind. And Elijah and Moses, the prophets that their parents used to tell them stories about, they showed up. Did I mention that it was just Peter, James, and John? You wonder what the other 9 were thinking. You wonder what the questions were that they had in their head. Maybe you can even imagine what like the draft pecking order looked like. Like, first round pick from Bethsaida, fisherman, Peter. 8th round pick from Capernaum, tax collector, Matthew. Jesus has got to start teaching. He's got to start teaching them, and he gives them their first slice of humble pie. When's the last time Jesus gave you your slice of humble pie? Maybe it was in a conversation with a friend, and it hit. And they're telling you about their week and how it's going, and it just hits. I'm not the only one with challenges in this world. Maybe it was through someone else. Maybe it was through a friend or a spouse, a child, whoever it was. Maybe they look at you and they see your course of action, and they don't necessarily see greatness, but they see selfishness and they see pride. And it's in a moment like that, where it starts to sink in a little bit more. I'm guilty. We're guilty. Man, we need forgiveness. I need forgiveness. Maybe you're like me, and today, not only did it hit through every source and every soul that our great God himself has created, but maybe it really hits home when you take a look at Mark 9. When you take a look at how God fleshes out what greatness really looks like. Pursuing greatness? Yeah, that should be easy, since I'm not God, but it's not. It's not for the Christian. It's not for the world. Maybe it's because our definitions are off. Maybe it's because what God thinks is great and what we generally think is great are two completely different things. Maybe it's because we forget that what God says is great is something that we don't all too often like. Maybe it's because of pride. You know, it wasn't until this week where I figured something out about pride. And maybe I just figured it out about myself, but I'm willing to bet it's for all people. figured this out about pride. That while maybe we used to think that pride is usually thinking too highly of oneself, that's not the root of pride. Pride isn't just thinking too highly of oneself. It's uncertainty in one's own identity. I'm going to say that again. It's uncertainty in one's identity. It's that feeling of having to try to prove who we are, and not by God's standards, but by ours, by these hands, by this mouth, by these minds, by these feet. Pursuing greatness, that should be easy since I'm not God. And yet, it is easy since Jesus is God. Jesus looks at his disciples today and he tells them what greatness looks like. They just got to watch him transfigured before him. They just got to watch him shine brighter than any other human being in this world. They got to get a glimpse of what power, what greatness, what authority looks like. But no, that's not what it's all about. Jesus, he describes greatness in two unique ways for us today. The first one is this. It's the step-by-step gospel. It's an all-powerful God who sets every last bit of his power aside to save. It's an all-powerful God who empties himself. Absolutely zero energy left to do anything so that we might be forgiven, so that we might have life. Nothing about the Son of Man being handed over to men and being betrayed and being killed and then rising from the grave. Nothing about that seems great, but it is so great for us. It is so great for us. Because it's through that step-by-step gospel that we walk in forgiveness, that we walk in an identity that is full of joy, righteousness, and greatness. And then finally, Jesus doubles down. He doubles down hard. He says, that's my greatness for you, and now here's what greatness looks like. Here's what greatness also looks like in your lives. Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all. Do you know what happens when we understand that? Do you know what happens when we understand that being a part of God's kingdom and pursuing greatness is a good thing, and being a part of that greatness and trying to search for it under that greatness for which Christ says it is? Do you know what happens? Do you know what happens when we recognize that greatness is being the servant of all? Disciples' feet get washed. That's what happens. Little children get a bear hug from Jesus. Babies get their diapers changed. Little children get to hear about love and forgiveness for the first time in their lives from their teacher. All of those things being not things that get us noticed or recognized in this world, but things that are so amazing. All of those things not just being our duty, not being done begrudgingly, but like Jesus says, because we want to. We don't have to live with the feeling like we're in search of greatness, but never actually getting any sort of significance or reward from it. We've got that gift of greatness from our God. We've got it. So I guess the question now to end with is, what do we do with that gift? We've got greatness. What do we do with it? We pursue it. We pursue greatness. We don't use it to highlight ourselves or highlight our own greatness, but we use it to serve others greatly. It's easy since Jesus is God. Amen. At this time, I want to ask you all to please stand if you're able, and we'll